Welcome back guys. In this lecture, let us talk about exception. A exception is a runtime error, which can be handled by the programmer. So with our previous example, here we were getting a runtime error that is in our function. So we were trying to concatenate a string and an integer. So that can be controlled and handled by a programmer, either keeping a check on input or adding some restriction while performing this function. So we can handle as a programmer. So that means if a programmer can guess an error in the program, he can do something to eliminate that error or eliminate the harm that can cause by an error. Then it is called an exception. So if you look at a point of view from a theory purpose, if the programmer cannot do anything in case of an error, then it is called an error and not exception. But if a programmer can do something, if a programmer can try to solve something, or if a programmer can write separate condition, then it is called an exception. All the exceptions are represented as class in Python. So the exceptions which are already available in Python are called as built-in exception. The base class for all the built-in exception is base exception class. From base exception class, the subclass is called as exception, and from that there are different subclasses called standard exception and warning. So that means there is a base class for exception, and then there is a subclass, and then there are some standard errors, and then there are some warning. So as you know, there are hundreds and thousands of programmers which are already doing some errors. So these errors are already standard to the community. So that is why there are already classes to solve them. We just need to use that particular class to handle that error. Like our concatenation one, so this is a common error and it can happen with any programmer, and we just need to select the particular perfect class to avoid these type of error, and we will be doing that in our further lectures. Now if we move forward, just like we were talking about built-in functions, then user-defined function, there are also user-defined exception. Maybe most of the common exception are already under our standard error, but there can be some different problem, or there can be some different errors or exception which you might face, and all these errors and exception will be under user defined exception, and we can write our own exception. That means we can write our own condition to solve them or to throw an error. Now with the particular program, you see this type error is under our standard error. That means this is already a defined error and we can use our predefined condition to solve that. So in the next lecture, we will be talking about exceptional handling. So the purpose of handling errors in the program should be strong. That means if you are working on a software, if you are working on a web portal, you cannot stop in the middle of your execution and throw this type of error to any user or your client. So you should be prepared for these type of error. The basic example of exceptional handling is when we visit any page of a website which is not available. So we get a 404, that is 404 page not found error. So that means there was certain condition that was already given to website owner. If this case occur, then throw a 404 error. There is a 500 error, that is server related errors. So if there is any problem with server, then throw this error. So we have to define certain error, certain exception with that condition. And as a programmer, your code should be strong. That means your code should be robust. So in the next lecture, let us talk about exceptional handling, in which we will be covering try, except, finally, else and lot more things. So see you in the next one.